Hi, Clint Kiddens here with Anderson Business Advisors. And in this segment, I'm going to discuss how to form a limited liability company for your real estate investing. All right, let's get started. Now, when it comes to setting up an LLC for your real estate investing, there's a lot of questions that go into, what type of LLC I should set up? Where should I set up the LLC? When should I set up the limited liability company? Well, I understand it can be tremendously confusing when you go out on the internet and there's thousands upon hundreds of thousands of articles and videos of individuals talking about setting up LLCs for their real estate investing. Well, at the end of the day, it really comes down to some basic principles is the way I look at it. So we want to know when, where, and how I need to set up that LLC. So let's talk about the first one. When should you be setting up a LLC for your real estate investing? Well, the way I look at it is what type of real estate do you intend to acquire? If you're looking to purchase commercial real estate, so if I'm going to buy commercial property, all right, then I want to set up the LLC now, all right? You want to get that LLC set up before you acquire the property. Ideally, you should make the offer for that commercial property in the name of the limited liability company. Now, if you're unsure what constitutes commercial property, it's more than 4 units. So if you're buying something that has 5 units or greater, that is considered to be commercial real estate. So you would set that up now and make the offer in the name of the LLC. Now, if you messed up and you didn't set it up before you made the offer, don't worry. Most commercial lenders understand that. They want you to close in the name of a limited liability company so you can set it up after the fact. But I think it's much cleaner if you have it set up ready to go ahead of time. So commercial, you want to set it up now. So let's talk about residential because this is a problem. All right. I run into this a lot with people with residential. If you have residential real estate, you need to look at how you're going to be paying for that property. If you're paying cash for the property, all right, so let's break this up even further into things. So if I'm paying cash for my residential real estate, then we go to now. So you'd want to set that up now if you're going to be using cash to buy it. You're not using financing. Again, make the offer in the name of the LLC, close in the name of the LLC when you're buying for cash. If you're using a portfolio lender, okay, so a portfolio lender typically is a community lender, someone who is not going to be selling your loan. They're going to hold the loan and finance themselves internally. If you're using a portfolio lender for residential real estate, then again, I would set it up now. All right, so let's get that thing set up ahead of time, knowing that I'm going to be using a portfolio lender, so I make my offer in the name of the limited liability company. Now, if you're using Freddie Fannie products, traditional lenders, okay, so I'll just call that traditional. All right, if you're going to work with a traditional lender, then I'm going to say do it later. All right, there's no rush to set up that limited liability company with a traditional, if you're using traditional financing, Freddie Fannie type products, because you can't close in the LLC. They look at this as an LLC would have to be a commercial loan. The thing is, under Freddie Fannie guidelines, if it's under 4 units or less, that's residential property, you're not eligible for a commercial loan. So you're forced into the residential side. And therefore, you cannot close in the LLC because that would have to be a commercial product. So what happens here typically is that with the residential Freddie Fannie, what we're going to do is set up the limited liability company after we close. Or, when you're getting close to closing, your money's gone hard. It might be a good idea then to look at establishing that LLC. So after you close in your own name and financing is secured, then you'll deed the property into that LLC. So it's not one of those things we're going to be able to close in directly. All right, so that's the when. All right, let's talk about the where. Where am I going to create this limited liability company? Well, for most part, what I tell people, when you're buying property, residential real estate, commercial real estate that you intend to use, to generate income, then that property or that LLC needs to be set up in the state where the property is located. Now, so this is for rental stuff. If we're flips, completely different. Watch one of my other videos where I discuss flipping, and I'll talk about using Wyoming limited liability companies for your flips because you're not engaged in regular and continuous business in a particular state. But when you buy property, let's say in Florida as a rental, well, you're going to hold that long term. You're engaged in business there by collecting rents. So it necessitates registration there. Again, these are all general topics. If you want to get more specific about your situation, be sure to sign up for one of my free strategy sessions. In the show notes, you can see the link to get that strategy session. And the reason why I say that is that there's always nuances to this. If you live in California, you may not want to create a California limited liability company for your residential real estate because you have 8 properties and you start doing the math and you realize 8 times 8, meaning the franchise tax, that's $6,400 a year. Don't worry, there are workarounds for that. We could talk to you offline on a strategy session. I don't have time to go into it here. So where do we want to set up these LLCs? Typically, it's going to be the state where the property is located. Okay, where property is located. That's where I'm going to create the limited liability company because it's doing business in that state. I can tell you how many people will contact me with this problem that they went to one of those internet sites where or entity mills out of Las Vegas. These companies that, they get a salesman on the phone. They're like, oh, you need to set up here in Las Vegas. And here's all the benefits of owning or having a Nevada limited liability company. And where's your property? Oh, it's in Illinois. No problem. We'll set it up in a Nevada LLC. Or if it's in Florida, we'll do a Nevada LLC for that. That stuff all works. You can do it. But as soon as you try to evict your tenant, good luck. Because your LLC is not registered to do business there. It didn't foreign file there. And they didn't tell you that little piece. Because if they did, then you would question, why did I set it up in Nevada to begin with? Why am I paying 2 state fees in order to protect this property? I should have just gone to Illinois at the outset. Well, the answer is because if you did that, then that company that set it up in Vegas, they're not making any extra money off you on an annual basis. So they have financial incentive to set you up in the wrong structures, unfortunately. So I've seen people run into this problem. They have the Nevada LLC owning property out of state, residential real estate. They try to evict a tenant. They can't evict them because that fact is brought up in court, and then they have to start all over again, pay back penalties and fees and things like that for not being registered there. So you just create a problem for yourself. So generally speaking, state where the property is located is where you're going to create the LLC. We're going to put that in quotes because in some situations, we're going to use land trusts, we'll use out-of-state LLCs, and that's why you need a strategy session to determine if that's the right approach for you. This covers about 75% of the real estate investors we work with. Now, when, where, and how, okay, the big one. How do we create the LLC? So, if you've watched some of my other videos, you know I'm a strong proponent of privacy. In our recent, there's a video I talk about how New York is looking to find out who the owners of LLCs are, that they think that information needs to be made publicly available to people. In fact, they actually passed a law in 2019 regarding that you have to make all real estate transactions involving LLCs, all the owners' information needs to be publicly available. Now, my take on it, there's only one reason to do that, and that is if you're concerned about it, tenants can bring pressure against the owners, even though their legal recourse only rests with the LLC. So when I'm creating LLCs, and we're talking about the how, I think you should always start with an LLC that offers anonymity. So it becomes a holding LLC, such as Wyoming or Nevada or Delaware. Start with this holding LLC to begin with. So this is step 1. And we'll just call this my anonymity Anon LLC right here that I own. It's not going to hold the real estate. It's there just to serve as a buffer to keep my affairs private. What we like to talk about is you can't sue what you can't see. So that's a good way of thinking about this. And then you're going to create the LLC in the state where the property is located. So this is state where property is located, state of prop. And it's going to be a member-managed LLC. So here's the how. How am I going to create this? I'm going to create this as a member-managed LLC. So the idea here is that when you set up this LLC, if you did this number 1, which you should do, then if anybody looks here, they see this LLC. And if they see the anonymity compliant LLC, they obviously don't see you because your information isn't on there. So this is the how. You set this one up down here as a manager managed. Okay, we've got to make sure that one's set up right. Manager managed. Okay, that's number 1. Then you create your in-state LLC as member managed, pointing back to that manager managed limited liability company. Now there's some tweaks you can put into it as well. Typically when we create these structures here, it can be cumbersome to try to operate in this fashion where this one is the manager of that one. That's why we build in special officer provisions inside of here, information that does not have to be disclosed to the Secretary of State because they don't collect it, but it gives you apparent authority. So you can operate out of this LLC as the president to do everything you need to do on behalf of that company. And that information isn't publicly disclosed anywhere. So, they come up with ways to always try to collect more information. We can always find ways to keep that information private. As a good asset protection firm, that's what you should be looking for in the individuals you're working with. Someone who understands real estate, how to create these structures to meet your needs. All right, guys, my name is Clint Kuhns with Anderson Business Advisors. Be sure to sign up for a free strategy session to make sure you're setting up your LLC the right way to make sure that your assets are completely protected.